So, when we cannot handle our own emotions, when we cannot feel our own emotions, how do we know how to handle somebody else's emotions?
So you're saying childhood trauma is something that impacts everyone.
One of the essential needs of a child is love and attention. So, if a child has not received that love and attention, they will try to seek that love and attention.
What technique would you follow to help someone with their inner child healing?
Do you know the simplest trauma that we have all gone through is our birth trauma? The child is, the moment they've come into the world, they are hit. They're made to cry. And they're put in on this very cold plate to weigh them. And then it's sharp lights. Everybody's talking. So imagine they were in the womb. It was a very safe place. And now they are here in this world where they feel very unsafe.
Something that we don't think about in our daily lives is our inner child and the kind of traumas that it goes through every day. And I feel that everyone should watch this podcast because it will help you identify if you have childhood trauma and to heal your inner child. Sumita ji, welcome to Infinite Health. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Anant. It's a great joy for me to be here today.
So, Sumita ji, today's theme is very interesting. It's something that I hear about a lot these days. I mean, as a millennial, we didn't grow up thinking about these things, but like from the current Gen Z population, and there's so much chatter around it. And this is something that I'd love your views and thoughts on. That's inner child and childhood trauma. To just sum it up in a few words. Uh, just to begin with, what is exactly inner child?
So, inner child, to understand inner child, I would say that have you ever seen a baby? What is the first thought that comes to you?
Um, just the size of the baby, like small.
The feeling, what would you feel?
Innocence.
Perfect. So, yes, the moment you see a baby, you see the innocence, the purity. And have you ever seen a baby stressed or depressed?
No, never. I mean, I would be surprised if I saw one, but yeah.
Yeah. So, imagine all of us were like that. Okay. But then something happened, and then something disconnected us from that state. So this state of purity, innocence, joy, spontaneity, and resilience, this is the inner child qualities which we were all born with. And somewhere down the line we got disconnected from these qualities, and that has created the trauma in all of us. So let us understand more on this topic. So, inner child is this God self in us, the way we were born, very pure, uncomplicated, very self contained, self fulfilled. And we have all gone through this trauma or conditioning, which started with the parents, our caretakers, the school, the society, the religion, the culture. So everyone imposed some kind of belief systems on us, conditionings on us, and that took us away from our true essence, who we were at the beginning. So imagine, we have very often heard that boys don't cry, but you see, girls are very emotional and they will cry. And what happens in future, that in a couple, a lot of women, they complain that their husbands cannot handle their emotions. Why? Because men have been taught from childhood that they cannot emote. So what they have done, they have repressed their emotions. So what has that led to? It has led to a accumulation of repressed emotions where we have learned not to feel, which has become emotional coldness, emotional numbness. So, when we cannot handle our own emotions, when we cannot feel our own emotions, how do we know how to handle somebody else's emotions? And that is why at a later stage in life, they are incapable of handling a wife who is emotional.
So, would you say that men are dysregulated in some form? Most men.
I won't say it's men per se. It is that how we have been programmed or conditioned that can trigger certain dysfunctionalities. It has got nothing to do with men or women, it can be with both.
Right. So you're saying childhood trauma is something that impacts everyone for that matter. It's not something that, there's a section of people who have childhood trauma and there's a section of people who don't, right? But what about those people who say that, I don't have any childhood trauma? Would you believe them or would you agree with them?
So a lot of times, many a time what happens is we do not know that we have trauma, but how we lead our life as an adult, that reveals whether we have trauma or not. Say simple signs, say a person has anger issues, a person has some kind of an addiction like alcohol, smoking, even nowadays it's shopping or work, workaholic. So it shows there is a problem, because when I'll give you a very simple example. So imagine a child, uh, John, has been told by the parents that if you come first in class, I'm going to get you that bike. So what is this reprogrammed in the child?
It's rewarding.
Yes. So I am loved only if I come
Succeed.
first.
Yes.
So it is based on, the reward is based on what he's achieving.
So basically, you're saying that if you win something, only then you will get a reward. Otherwise, it's a struggle.
So ideally, the love to the child is unconditional.
Mm.
It is not dependent when the whether a child does something, and only then they will receive that. So here what can happen in the future, this child grows up and wants to have a lot of recognition, a lot of trophies, a lot of awards. He is a workaholic, he does great in work, very successful. He's overworking all the time and getting awards all the time from everywhere. But what about his personal life?
Right.
There's a complete work life balance, and the wife is unhappy, the children are unhappy because the father maybe is too much at work. So this is the achiever self that has got activated. So he thinks if he gets an award, he will be loved. It is that wounded inner child that is operating even when we are an adult, and that's creating a problem in the couple life in future.
But do you think that this inner child trauma that we all deal with at some point in our lives is something that we can identify on our own? Like, what are the signs that you could tell if someone is suffering through their childhood trauma at that point of time? So, let me just clarify. There are so many couples around me who've started having babies, who've started becoming mothers and fathers. And whenever I've spoken to them, they've always told me that, childhood trauma is something that is impacting right now, that is coming back to them of what their childhood was like or the traumas that they faced in their life when they were kids. So, different people have different points where they actually start imbibing those traumas, or start realizing those traumas. Like, how do you get away from that? Like, how do you cope up with those triggers?
Okay, very important question, Anant. And so we have to understand that this is passed down through generations. Because, say, for example, in today's day, there is a lot of awareness about conscious parenting, and we have coaching, we have classes. So the couples of today are much more aware, and they want to give a very healthy upbringing to their children. But before, this was not there. And imagine where there were, say, many children, and the attention was difficult to give to all the children equally. Maybe it was a joint family, and talking about, say, 20 years, 50 years back. And there could have been some trauma, because the child, one of the essential needs of a child is love and attention. So if a child has not received that love and attention, they will try to seek that love and attention. So even if we are an adult, that child which has not received the love and attention, it will try to achieve. So how we can do it? We can try to be a people pleaser.
Right.
We can try to avoid conflicts at all costs. Okay. And also, like, there are certain needs of a child which needs to be met in order to become a responsible adult. There are a few stages in our development as a child which are called the inner child developmental stages. And when we have our needs met, because we need to have this ability to, explore, ability to create, ability to feel, ability to, you know, be fearless. That gives us the confidence also. So I'll give you one of my examples which I faced in my life. So when I was a child, maybe 5, 6 years old, I had a very strong intuition or a gut feeling, whatever you may say. And I used to tell my parents, and they would think, how come this girl is saying these things? So nobody would believe me. But later on, whatever I would have shared with them, it would come true. So when I grew up, I was always a problem with confidence, a lack of confidence, self-esteem, and never really trusting myself. Whereas I knew that, even after have studied so much and worked on myself so much, I would never be, confident to come out. So what happened is, I was working on this. I wanted to understand why I was having this feeling of a lack of confidence. When I realized in a meditative session that as a child I had this invalidation, and that created a lack of confidence in me. So when I did a session on myself with related to this inner child wound, I could reprogram that. And the moment I did that, within a month, things started shifting for me. And I was more confident and I could come out from that hiding.
So you're saying that someone who has childhood trauma can really heal themselves for good and like not pass it to the next generation?
Absolutely. So that is why inner child is so beautiful and so powerful, because once we are conscious of it, because it is an unconscious repetition from one generation to the other, and when we have understood, okay, this has created this in me, I will definitely not want to pass it on to my children or predecessors. So I would like to share an example here, like how inner child is so powerful. So I had this lady come to me. This was in 2014. So she had a lot of addictions. So she was drinking, smoking, having weed, even drugs, and had she was engaged in multiple relationships, even though she was married. And in a session, she had heard about inner child, and she spoke to me, and she could identify. And then we did a extensive sessions with her, one-to-one sessions with her, which lasted for nearly 10 days, because there was a lot. And after those 10 days, she actually stopped drinking, smoking, weed, and multiple relationships. And then now her life has completely changed, and it's a real joy to see this, how powerful this is.
But just like that's such an interesting story, because like what I really wanted to understand was what triggered her for those things. Like just pointing out your story. I mean, I don't want to get personal on someone's personal history, but considering that person is ex, what triggered her to do those things in the first place?
Okay. So what had happened to her is that she was raped at the age of 6 years old,
Okay.
and she was very scared of her parents, so she had not spoken about it. This was in 2014, probably at that time she was around her late 30s, and all those years it was inside her. So it was a lot of rebellion, and so because it was a one-to-one session, I also did a past life regression session with her, and there was a lot of anger, obviously. So when I did a past life regression session with her, then she realized that she had been a perpetrator in another lifetime, and then she could forgive the person in this lifetime. She could understand how it had started the cycle. So from being a victim, she understood her role as a perpetrator, And then she could understand that, okay, I need to change this part in me, and this is my karma. That is why at the age of 6 years, she had to go through this. And thereafter, she was having a lot of difficulties with her mother, of course. But later on, once the inner child work was done, her relationship with her mother also improved. And she could completely let go of this cycle of becoming a victim
Hmm.
and this rebellion, this anger also, because a lot was unsaid. And I think few years back, now she was able to communicate with her parents and
About what happened.
about what happened, and things are completely neutral. And
That's very good to hear that someone really healed. That's a very inspiring story. Because something that I really wanted to understand is that what technique would you follow to help someone with their inner child healing?
so, inner child healing is a very different kind of a technique where we use, it's not like a conventional that you just do a meditation healing. No, we have talk therapy, we have creative art, we have visualizations, we have more of like a child, what things, activities a child would do, say painting, art, clay modeling, games. So, it's very fun and it's activating those memories. We go back into those times. There are question answers also, questionnaires, which help us to understand that what were the needs, to have a very clear understanding that what needs were not met. And thereafter, we go into those memories and where we had recorded certain wounds, and we transform those from the root cause, and what we would have done, what the child needed at that time and didn't get. That is why it is called reparenting and reclaiming the inner child.
Right. Like reparenting is a very good word that I wanted to highlight because that's a very interesting word for me. Because my next question is about that, like reparenting. Because when I think of childhood trauma, when I think of inner child healing, there are two kinds of people that I see in my head. I mean, there is one child who, say, hid things from his parents or unintentionally had issues with their parents, and that was a part of the trauma. And then there are others where the parents are toxic, like toxic people, like where like a child was under very toxic narcissistic influence of their parents. I mean, would you suggest if someone had toxic parents that they cut them out of their life or they forgive them? Because that's something that I've debated in my head for a very long time.
Okay, so there are, so I will go one by one. So, one thing is that if we have attracted such parents, again, it is part of our choice as a soul. We are not a victim here. We have come here to learn. So we have decided to have such parents and this scenario in our lives. So we have, so we are living that life, and so there is no question of really feeling that I'm a victim. It is about more about having the knowledge that, okay, I've had this situation. Now what I do forward, going forward, what can I do about myself? Because that situation, if even if I've gone through a toxic situation in my life, is there for a reason, because evil is educational. So, a negative situation in our life is always there to help us to understand what we need to change in ourselves, what we need to improve in ourselves. And if our parents have had certain narcissistic traits or qualities, it means symbolically also, we understand that we may have been like that in another timeline or lifetime, if we believe in past lives also, that we could have had that in our ways of behaving. That is why in this lifetime we are attracting a scenario like this. So now I have that choice with wisdom to change this memories, this karma in me. So once I do that, I can be completely neutral. I can affirm myself better, I can assert myself better, and I can live a more authentic and independent life, instead of being affected by this
So
negativity.
you're saying it's not necessary to either disconnect from your parents or validate it in any other way. You can just be a positive person for yourself, and make sure that you're living the life you wanted instead of thinking about it from that angle.
Yes, it's about taking accountability for your life and responsibility. See, the first thing that we need to understand is we need to be grateful to our parents for the gift of life that we have received from them,
Mhm.
because we cannot compare anything. They have given us the gift of life, and they at whatever circumstances they had, we do not know. So when we go through this healing, we understand this from various angles also, that maybe the parents didn't have that much of knowledge. So during our inner child healing, we also learn to not only express our grievances, which is also important, but at the same time understand the parents' points of view. What were their limitations? What was their knowledge or lack of knowledge? So when we have a more global vision, a spiritual vision of that scenario, because as a child we are very egocentric in a way. It's only I, me, myself. My world only consists of
Mhm.
me. So we do not understand what the adults may be going through, what their situations are, or what kind of trauma they may have faced as children. So when we do this healing, we also come to know all this global vision of life, and that helps us to be at a better place, to not only forgive our parents, make peace with the past, and take responsibility and accountability for our own life and our own choices.
But
It's
just to add to what you're saying, like, um, is it like a one time thing? Like, because say if I have childhood trauma or unresolved inner childhood issues, I mean, it can't be a one time thing, right? I mean, because it evolves with time. I mean, even if I heal it, I mean, there are things that will keep coming back to us and haunting us as we move on in life. So it has to be a continuous process, right? Or is it like a one time thing where if you've really healed yourself, then the intensity of the problem won't be that much?
yes, for sure. So, for example, I can say that, like I said, I was always into hiding. Like today, if I'm able to do the podcast today, is possibly because of my healing. Otherwise, I would still be hidden.
Right.
And
I'm glad.
so so the thing is that percentages, we are human beings and we have percentages of qualities and again distorted aspects in us. So whatever that is coming up in our life is only telling us what we need to change and improve in ourselves.
Right.
So there is nothing negative about it, but a major you can say a portion or a percentage of the difficulties definitely changes. Like I have experienced in my life, the authenticity, you're more authentic, you are more self contained, you are more confident, you do not people please because you're very happy with yourself. So when you are happy with yourself and you love yourself, you learn to accept and love yourself, respect yourself. So there is no need to seek approval.
But just to explore this further, I mean, there are so many people around you or around me that, like, have childhood trauma or have inner childhood problems. How do I support a friend or a partner who I know is going through childhood trauma?
You can educate them about it. So like today, now you know that this kind of modality exists where we can really help. So of course you can e- explain to them that childhood trauma exists. And I would like to share here that a lot of times a lot of people don't think that they have childhood trauma because apparently they've had a very beautiful um, happy life. Very parents have given them a lot of attention, love, so they cannot identify a trauma. But the simplest trauma that we have all gone through is our birth trauma.
Right.
We've all gone through birth trauma. And imagine we have been born, and the way we have been born also, that because there are different types of birth,
Hmm.
if you know. And the child is, the moment they've come into the world, they are hit. They're made to cry. And they're put in on this very cold plate to make weigh them. And then it's sharp lights. Everybody's talking. So imagine they were in the womb. It was a very safe place. And now they are here in this world where they feel very unsafe. So that is the first trauma each one of us have faced. And that is why in today's living, a lot of parents are also having very conscious birth processes so that the child doesn't have to go through trauma, you know. And so everyone has trauma. And when we can understand this now, we can really change things. I can share my example because I had a cord around my neck when I was born. And how it happened was, so I always used to, like I said, had cervical spondylitis. I always used to have neck problems, and I could never express my feelings.
Right.
I could never wear a chain on my neck. It used to really feel very suffocated for me. And when I did my healing work and inner child work, I realized when I visited the womb stage, I saw this memory, where my mother was very worried. And because I was the second born child, and the grandparents were expecting a boy child. So she was very worried ki ab kya hoga. And so I could understand from the womb that my parents were not bothered whether I'm a boy or a girl. They were not bothered, but they were very anxious about what the grandparents want.
Like the expectation burden.
Expectation burden. So now I was telling my mother that why can't you go and tell them that you are fine with me being a girl. So, because of that, I did not want to come out when it was time. And apparently, I was playing with the umbilical cord and I had it around my neck because I didn't want to. I was very happy in my mother's womb. I didn't want to come out. So, it was like a life and death scenario for me and my mother. But of course, I came out. But what happened was, because of the cord around my neck, I had a lot of pain. So, when I had to have my mother's milk, the first time I had to have my mother's milk, I could not suck the milk because I had pain in my throat. And when I was going through this, regression therapy also, I could feel that pain. It was the first time I felt it. And I said, am I feeling pain? So my therapist said that, oh, it's catharsis. You are experiencing catharsis. And it was very real, Anant. And I actually felt like a thread around my
Wow.
throat. And I couldn't drink the milk. So they thought, oh, she's not hungry, and they didn't feed me. And it was like I was near my mother. The milk was mine for me to be nourished. But at the same time, I went hungry. So the first thought that I received when I came was, I have it, but I don't have it. And then what happened in my life? Every time in my life, I was feeling this exact same pattern. I have, but I don't have. I have, but I don't have.
Hmm.
So when I did this inner child healing and I understood this, it took time, Anand. Healing is not a one day thing. Healing is not a magic wand because it is about reprogramming, restructuring not only this life, but many lifetimes of data. So, but with time, gradually, this process started changing.
Hmm.
And now I can tell you that in a recent workshop, when I went and I went to the same memory, I could completely reprogram this and it had changed. So I knew that I had completely healed this cycle.
Right.
And thereafter, I was better able to manifest my potential and possibilities on this earth plane. So, what I would like to share here is that when we relive a memory, you can relieve it. And also, the issues are in the tissues. So, that is why it is so important to experience experience something in the body, because you cannot deny that. We may say that healing works, healing doesn't work, but when we experience it ourselves, the conviction automatically comes from that. And then the changes will follow, life will transform, and we will upgrade.
Sumita ji, I'm so glad that you followed this healing pattern for yourself and you got healed and you're adding so much value to the people. This was a very insightful conversation. I think it's fab on learning about so much in depth about childhood trauma and inner child healing. Thank you so much for coming. This was a lovely show.
Thank you, Anand. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.